Hello everyone, Chris Martinson of Peak Prosperity here. This is an update for you. I know it's been a little while. Today's update, hey, it's Friday, November 9th, 2018. Look, we're on the backside of the elections and have a few things to report about that. I also want to tell you a little bit about what's going on in the oil space, particularly U.S. shale oil. Hey, before you say that's not interesting to you, trust me, there's some really interesting stuff going on there because so much of our future depends on the story that's being peddled being true, and it's probably not. And to close it all out, I want to invite you to take a look at our website, Peak Prosperity, where I've got another two-part report out this week. It's explaining why I'm going a little bit further in preparing than I usually do. So as you know, we're big on preparing at Peak Prosperity. We think it's a prudent thing to do. We think it's responsible, provided you do it before a crisis hits. If you begin preparing like everybody else in the middle of an approaching hurricane, or you run down to the store after the earthquake, or the financial markets close down and then you try and figure out what you're going to do, those become acts of hoarding. They become irresponsible. They're not helpful. So everything we're doing here is about being helpful. It's just about taking out prudent insurance like you would on a house or any other thing you care a lot about. It's just our society right now in the United States doesn't really support things that your great-grandparents would have recognized as being just part of life, which is knowing where your food is and having really good relations with your neighbors as best you could and so on. So with that, where do we start? The elections. Remember, I put out that piece a little while ago where I said the elections are all rigged and that the voting machines are really not to be trusted. And of course, trust shouldn't be part of the voting. Verifying, that's part of it. Nobody should have to trust anything. I shouldn't have to trust that my vote is getting counted. I should be able to verify. Those are two very important words. I see trust used a lot in the media. It's the wrong word. People shouldn't have to trust their voting system. Why? Because other people are running it and there's power involved. Humans are humans. Go all the way back to Peloponnesian times and you'll find, the Machiavellian, desire for power is there in every hierarchical human society because egos get run amok and bad people rise to the top. It's just how this all works. So trust isn't part of it. Verifiable, that would be cool. Now remember, I said there are going to be some issues and some troubles, particularly in places where there were electronic voting machines still being operated. And the reason for that is that these things are wildly insecure, just horrible, like horrifying. So let's take a look at this. I love this one. Check this out. Texas election officials confirmed that voting machines used in 30% of the counties, including its biggest, are switching people's votes, including the Senate race between Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke. The GOP appointed officials say they have no legal authority to update them. Yeah, and guess what's also going to happen? They're not going to update them after the fact either, or if they do, they might put in ones that are worse or just as bad. Listen, people. The reason we have insecure voting systems is because the two parties like it that way. Not Democrat or Republican, they both like it that way. And so that's why, I've really been saying that these elections, they're more like kabuki theater, meaning there's an act, it has a predetermined outcome, and everybody wears elaborate costumes, and there's an applause track that comes along with it. In this case, the equity markets, they just rallied like crazy in the aftermath of the election. I think to cast a market vote to say the people trust the outcome. I don't trust these outcomes, not even slightly. Look at the rest of the headlines that just popped up, and this is just in the last 24 hours here, so this would have come out maybe on Thursday. Florida and Georgia prepare for recounts amid claims of irregularities. These are way beyond claims. There's tons of irregularities there. So guess what? Having a verifiable voting system is easy as pie. In fact, we've had them for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's called paper ballots. Real easy. That's it. You have a paper ballot. Two parties come together. They watch each other like hawks in a room, and they count them up. And maybe a little, maybe it's not perfectly accurate. Maybe every vote doesn't count. But when you have interested parties both watching the process, you get something. But who can look inside an electronic voting machine? Nobody. That's the point. That's why we use them. So no surprises there that we've got some mysterious results. But the big mystery to me is that people still think that there's something different that happens in terms of the overall arc of things because this person's in power versus that, when in truth, the last 50 years of U.S. history has all been basically looking very monolithic in terms of its approach to war, environmental policy, energy policy, things I care about. Now, what's interesting, let me switch to energy real quick because energy's everything. You either have it or you don't. There's a big story running around, maybe you've heard, that the United States is now pumping more oil than ever before, which is true. And that we're going to be able to do this for a very long time, which is not true. And that we're the new Saudi Arabia, debatable. Now you got to get into qualities of oil and how big the fields are, stuff like that. But what's almost always left out of this story is the fact that these shale operators have been burning money. They've lost hundreds of billions of dollars since they've started. They managed to lose money in every oil price environment. Well, can I tell you, except that's not a good business model. The truth is, I think it's a viable business model, but not at these oil prices. Oil would have to be twice as high, I think, to really fully support this industry. And I don't just mean the profit and loss statements of the shale companies. I mean, once you factor in all the damage that happens to the bridges and the roads and then having to replug the wells and dealing with all the wastewater that comes out of these things, etc. Once you have a full cycle cost of these things, social plus the corporate costs of the companies running these, I think you need an oil price twice as high as where it currently is. 100 to 120, I think, is where you need to be in order for this to pay for itself. Not even close to that. So what do we have in terms of big news? Couple things. So I like to follow people who are really in the industry. So we had a couple of things since the last update that really popped out at me. The first, let me give you the first here. This is coming to us via the Financial Times. Ed Crooks writing in there on November 19, 2018. He's got an article here. It was based around the earnings call from the CEO of Schlumberger, which is a big oil field services company, who's holding this. Now, Schlumberger, they all over the world, but they're heavily in the United States markets, particularly in the Permian field, the Eagle Ford, Texas. They're all over that stuff, right? So check this out. Read a couple things. According to Pal Kiebsgaard, the CEO of Schlumberger, U.S. oil production could fall short of its most optimistic projections because of emerging problems in the industry. Now, what kind of problems might he be talking about? First, there's a shortage of pipeline capacity in the Permian. Guess what? That'll get fixed. That's not really a problem. That's a temporary problem. He's talking about something that's more like a predicament, which means hard to fix, if not impossible. He said there were other problems besides the pipeline capacity and that forecasts of future output would have to be revised down. He noted it's becoming more difficult to increase production as shale oil fields mature and new wells are being sunk in areas that have already been drilled. And he goes on to talk about what are called parent and child wells. The parent well, you have a big section of land, you're going to put a well down there, that's the parent well, it's going to be your best producer. But then you're thinking, can I sneak a couple others in around this? How close can I put them? These are the child wells. They're drilled really close to the parent well, and you try and drill them so close that they don't actually steal from the parent. Which children are known to do, particularly child wells. So at any rate, this has been happening more and more, and you might be thinking, oh, okay, so we're getting a couple of child wells now finally being drilled around parent wells. Well, full stop. By the time you're drilling child wells, it means you kind of have drilled that play out. I mean, you don't have any other great parent well locations, so at least not in good geology. So I guess what you instead of putting a new parent over in some bad geology, let's sneak some child wells in to the good geology. So how much is that happening, you might ask? Good question. All right, let's check that out. He goes on to say, the threats to U.S. oil production growth highlighted by Mr. Kiebsgaard center on issues where those child wells. So in the Eagle Ford Shale of South Texas, average production per foot of well length and per pound of proppant, that's the sand, the stuff they pump in to hold the cracks open in the fracking, has been falling steadily. So production per foot of well falling steadily. Big deal. Okay, second thing, he blamed the decline on rising proportion of child wells, which are now up to 70% of all new wells drilled. 70%. That's not like we're drilling a couple. They are now the dominant form of new well being parked in. Hey, listen, shale plays were amazing. Notice the use of the word were. Little past tense action there. Second, we have Mark Papa. He's a pioneer in the U.S. shale revolution. He is currently the CEO of Centennial Resources, and under his leadership, EOG, which Resources, one of the bigger ones out there, really developed a reputation as one of the key leaders in the shale industry. So, guy's a very experienced hand at this. He said, the impression of U.S. shale being the big bad wolf is perhaps a bit overstated, quote, and he said, that the best days are behind some of the most major U.S. oil shale fields after a period of low oil prices. First off, it prompted drillers to train the rigs on their best acreage and deplete their most cost-effective acreage first. He says, quote, "There are good geological spots in shale plays and weaker geological spots," something we've been talking about for a while, "and a lot of the good geological spots have already been drilled," end quote. Quote again, "My theory is that you've got basically resource exhaustion that is beginning to take place. It's no secret that you've only got 3 shale oil plays in the U.S. of any consequence. The rest of them don't amount to a hill of beans." Well, that's really important news, because a lot of people, including Ford Motor Company, have really bet the ranch on this idea that shale plays are perpetual and that they're going to be with us forever. And it was only about a month ago that the United States under Trump, the Energy Department there said, we're going to not have an oil strategy anymore. We just think there's so much oil we don't really need to have in the United States an energy strategy. Trust me, people, this is coming. It's going to bite. It's going to bite really, really hard. Maybe not this year, but in a couple years, 2020, 2022 for sure. That's why you have to prepare for this. This is going to just destroy capital markets. And once people understand there's not enough oil out there to run an exponential economy, guess what? It's over. So the next questions are, well, how much are stock and bond markets worth in a world of flat to negative growth? The answer is a fraction of their current value, of course. How many people can we really employ in a world of flat to declining growth? The answer is a ton less. Plus, you put in all the other trends around robotics, all of this and that. It's going to be hard. And almost nobody's talking about this. And neither the Democrats nor the Republicans chose to talk about any of this in this last election cycle. That's why I didn't pay any attention, because the things they were talking about are so far down the priority list of things that could actually harm our future prospects and your life and mine that they're not even worth talking about. But an energy strategy, using the remaining shale assets wisely to build towards an energy future we can believe in, really beginning to refashion transportation, housing, jobs, agriculture, water use, all of this needs to happen. It's not happening. That's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm talking to you directly. So these are worth talking about. Come by Peak Prosperity. Check out this report. I'm talking specifically about the new preparations that I'm taking in my life, because I got to be honest, the range of threats out there is getting larger, not smaller, and really it's the social mood that's begun to catch my attention as something that could really accelerate the changes and maybe the disruptions. So with that, come by, check that out as well. I'm going to be talking about these things that I just talked to you about here in written form, and we'll have great discussions over there. So please come check all of that out. That's at peakprosperity.com. I will see you next time.